They say that history repeats itself, but what we are witnessing now is not just history. It is prophecy unfolding before our very eyes. The headlines scream of alliances, of war, of nations joining hands in battle. The United States, a nation once founded on the principles of divine truth, has now stepped into the fires of the Middle East conflict, aligning itself in a war not birthed in righteousness, but in reaction. But what if this moment is not about politics at all? What if it's about something deeper, something ancient? What if it's not about what's happening on the battlefield, but what's happening in the heart of a nation? There was a time when this nation turned to God in the face of adversity. There was a time when the leaders knelt in prayer before making decisions of war and peace. There was a time when truth was not mocked, when righteousness was not legislated out of our courts and schools. But now we see a different America, an America that has forgotten. And when a nation forgets the God who raised it, it begins to crumble from within. You can't expect a system to stand when the foundation has been abandoned. We think tanks and analysts may say this war is strategic, that it's about defense, about democracy, about our interests overseas. But heaven sees more than strategies. Heaven sees hearts, and the heart of this nation has been drifting. We call it justice, but it's compromise. We call it strength, but it's fear. We call it moral leadership, but it's hollow. We have turned our back on the very one who gave us the blessing, and we expect that blessing to remain. This isn't just about the U.S. joining a war. It's about a system that is failing. The collapse of a moral compass is not sudden. It's slow, deliberate, and often unnoticed until it's too late. We redefine what is evil and call it good. We exalt the flesh and cast down the spirit. We mock holiness and celebrate rebellion. And then we act shocked when the world spirals into chaos. But we must understand, this is what happens when a nation chooses man over God, when comfort is chosen over conviction, and when truth is no longer welcome in the public square. The system is failing because it was never meant to sustain itself without the presence of God. A government, no matter how democratic, cannot hold itself up without righteousness. An army, no matter how powerful, cannot win battles if it wars against heaven. And a people, no matter how proud, cannot escape the consequences of turning away from the one who formed them. But what does this mean for you? Because you are not just watching this unfold, you are living in it. You are not a spectator, you are part of the generation that must decide. Will we follow the system as it falls, or will we rise above it? Will we be swept away in the wave of fear, bitterness, and confusion, or will we plant our feet on the rock that does not move? And in this moment, as the U.S. moves into the war, many will be filled with anxiety. Some will look for someone to blame. Others will try to escape. But the question isn't what the government does. The question is, what will you do? Will you fall into the narrative that this is just another war, another chapter in a broken world? Or will you recognize the sound of the trumpet, the warning call, that something far greater is taking place? You see, when moral foundations collapse, fear rushes in to fill the vacuum. And yet you were not made for fear. You were not called to blend into a collapsing culture. You were placed here for this time, to stand, to intercede, to speak truth even when truth is no longer convenient. You were chosen to carry the light into the midst of a failing system. This is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a reckoning. It is a moment where choices will be made not just in Washington, not just in Jerusalem, but in homes, in hearts, and in churches. We can no longer pretend that the collapse around us doesn't affect us. We must decide now where our allegiance lies. Not to party, not to platform, but to the King of all kings. Because if the system fails, but you stand, then you have not failed. And if the nation crumbles, but the remnant rises, then there is still hope. and if the world goes to war, but the people of God fall to their knees, then there is still a chance for mercy. You may look at the war and see only tanks, missiles, and alliances. You may turn on the news and hear the analysts speak of strategies, borders, defense systems. But let me tell you something that this world has forgotten. What happens in the physical is a mirror of what is happening in the spiritual. The shaking we are witnessing is not just military, it is prophetic. It is not just about conflict between nations, it is the clash between kingdoms. The scripture says that everything that can be shaken will be shaken. Why? So that what cannot be shaken may remain. What we are watching unfold is the shaking of the nations, the systems of man are trembling, the powers of the earth are being unmasked. And even now, as the United States joins Israel in war, you must ask yourself, what is this really about? This is not just about defending allies. This is not just about policy or security. It is a shaking. And the shaking begins with those who call themselves by his name, because judgment begins in the house of God. The nations are shaking because the people of God have been sleeping. And so the trumpet sounds not just over the cities of the Middle East, but over the hearts of every believer who has grown cold, every soul that has compromised, every voice that has gone silent. Do you think it's a coincidence that everything is converging at once, that the wars and rumors of wars are increasing, that violence is rising in the streets while deception rises in the courts, that natural disasters grow more frequent while spiritual confusion deepens? This is not coincidence, this is convergence. The signs have always been there, but now they are sounding louder. Louder than the bombs, louder than the generals, louder than the headlines. But here's what you must understand: the shaking is not the end. It is the mercy of God, because if he allows the ground beneath our feet to tremble, it is only so we stop trusting in it. The towers we built, the nations we exalted, the institutions we glorified, they are not eternal. The money, the weapons, the media, none of it will hold when the wind comes. But there is one who is unshakable. There is one whose kingdom cannot be moved, and he is calling us now not to panic, but to prepare. Do not be surprised that the alliances of man are crumbling. They were never meant to last. Do not be shocked that leaders are confused. They were never meant to be your saviors. Do not be shaken when the world shakes. You were never meant to build your life on its foundation. The true war is not with missiles. The true war is for the soul of nations. And the United States, once a beacon of light, once a nation under God, has now entered a war that may be seen as defense, but may also be a sign. A sign that the hour is late, that the line has been drawn, that neutrality is no longer an option. The ancient shaking has begun again. Just like in the days of Egypt, when God shook the empire so his people would be released. Just like in the days of Babylon, when the king was warned by a hand that wrote on the wall. Just like in the days of Rome, when the world thought itself indestructible, and yet it fell. The shaking is not new, but neither is the answer. And if you're feeling the tremble in your heart, in your home, in your spirit, it's because the shaking reaches into every part of your life. You cannot stand on what is breaking. You must stand on what is eternal, because everything that is built on sand will fall, and everything that is built on the rock will endure. You must choose now where you will stand, and in the middle of the chaos, here is the word: do not fear. The shaking may come, the storms may rage, but those who dwell in the shelter of the Most High will not be moved. This is not the time to fear. This is the time to rise. This is not the time to be overwhelmed. This is the time to overcome. The Lord is not absent in the storm. He is speaking from the storm. So, as the nations rise, as the missiles fly, as the foundations crack, remember this: the shaking is not to destroy you, it's to wake you. There is a war raging on the outside, yes, but there is a greater war raging within. It is the war no headline will report, no general will command, and no news anchor will describe. It is the war for your mind, your peace, your soul. And this war is waged not with bombs, but with thoughts. Not with weapons, but with fear. Not with armies, but with emotions so loud, so suffocating, that they can silence even the strongest voice of faith. Fear has become a language in our time. It's spoken on every screen, written in every scroll, embedded in every conversation. Panic is packaged and sold daily. Anxiety is the new atmosphere, and yet, amid all of it, we've forgotten something foundational, something eternal. Fear is not from God. Despair is not His spirit. The Word says, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. So if fear is not from Him, then where is it from? It's from a counterfeit kingdom, a false voice, a lying spirit that seeks to control, manipulate, and paralyze the people of God. It doesn't need to destroy you if it can keep you silent. It doesn't need to strike you down if it can keep you from standing up. And in this hour, as the world trembles and the war drums beat louder, the enemy is whispering fear into hearts all across the earth, telling you it's too late, telling you it's hopeless, telling you you're powerless, but it's a lie. You were not created to be ruled by your emotions. You were not fashioned in the image of anxiety. You were not called to carry the weight of fear on your shoulders. You were born again to overcome, and you do not overcome by the strength of the flesh. You do not overcome by denying reality or pretending it's all okay. No, you overcome by anchoring yourself in a deeper reality, a higher truth, a kingdom that cannot be shaken even when everything around you is falling apart. How do you overcome negative emotions in a time like this? You start by identifying the source. The enemy wants you confused. God wants you clear. The enemy thrives in shadows. God brings light. If fear has entered your heart, it's because somewhere along the line, you stopped looking at the king and started watching the storm. Peter walked on water until he took his eyes off Jesus and looked at the waves. That's when he sank. And that's exactly what happens to us. The moment you shift your gaze from the eternal to the immediate, you begin to drown in what was never meant to define you. But there is a way back, there is a way up, and it begins by lifting your eyes again, lifting your thoughts, lifting your spirit above the noise. You cannot silence fear with more fear. You overcome fear with faith. You overcome despair with hope. You overcome chaos by choosing peace. Not the world's peace, but the peace that surpasses understanding. The peace that comes from knowing that even when the earth quakes, the throne of God remains unshaken. It is not weakness to feel fear, but it is bondage to stay there. Emotions are real, but they are not your master. You have been given authority, not over nations perhaps, but over the territory of your mind and heart. And that is where the real victory begins. The enemy fears a believer who refuses to bow to fear. A man or woman who stands firm in peace while the world burns around them, that is more dangerous to darkness than any missile or law or army. Because that kind of faith is contagious, that kind of peace spreads, that kind of strength awakens others. And maybe that's why the war in your mind has been so intense. Maybe that's why the attacks have increased. Not because you're weak, but because you're a threat, because your peace is dangerous, because your joy breaks chains, because your clarity disrupts confusion. You were not given a spirit of torment. You were not destined to walk through this world barely surviving. You were chosen to walk through the fire without being burned, to sleep in the storm, to face Goliath with nothing but a sling and the presence of God. So what will you choose? Because in the end, fear is a choice. So is faith. Despair is a prison. So is hope. You can't always control what comes at you, but you can choose how you respond. Will you be ruled by the voices of the world or by the voice of the Spirit? Will you allow the chaos to get in you, or will you carry peace into the chaos? Because in this hour, the greatest weapon you can wield is not in your hands, it's in your heart. In times of war, the natural instinct is to blend in, to shrink back, to find safety in the crowd. But I tell you this now, not everyone was meant to blend in. Not everyone was meant to follow the crowd. In fact, there are some who were born to stand apart, to rise when others bow, to speak when others go silent, to shine when the world grows dark. And if you hear these words and something inside you stirs, it's because you are one of them. You were not born for normal times. You were not placed in this hour by accident. The world is falling apart for a reason. The systems are failing for a reason. The conflicts are erupting for a reason, because the time has come for the remnant to rise. And that remnant, that set-apart people, is not the wealthy, the powerful, or the politically connected. No, it's those whose hearts burn for truth, whose spirits cannot be bought, and whose eyes are fixed not on the kingdoms of this world, but on the kingdom that cannot be shaken. You can't be neutral in a war like this. You can't hide in the shadows and hope the storm passes. This is not a storm that passes. It's one that separates. It separates light from darkness, truth from lies, sheep from goats, the real from the counterfeit. And if you are going to survive this shaking, you must choose now whom you will serve, not in word, but in life. Not on paper, but in fire. The easy road is gone. The middle ground is disappearing. We are entering a time where compromise will no longer protect you. Blending in will not shield you. Hiding will not keep you safe, because the battle is not just for territory, it is for identity. And if the enemy can convince you that you are nothing more than a fearful, powerless spectator, he has already won the war in your life. But the truth is this: you were not created to run. You were created to stand. You were not called to retreat. You were called to resist. And the greatest act of resistance in this dark age is to live fully for God when everything around you says bow to fear, to confusion, to chaos. You are the answer to this hour, not because of your strength, but because of the one who lives inside you. And yet many feel disqualified. Many say, I'm too broken, or I've failed too many times, or I'm not strong enough for this fight. But listen, God has always used the unlikely. He chose Gideon, the weakest man in the weakest tribe, to defeat an army. He chose Esther, a hidden orphan girl, to save a nation. He chose fishermen, tax collectors, and outcasts to shake the Roman Empire. So if you feel unqualified, congratulations. You're exactly the kind of person God is looking for. You don't need a pulpit to speak truth. You don't need a position to take a stand. You don't need permission to live boldly. What you need is the fire that says, I will not bow to fear. I will not drown in despair. I will not stay silent while the world burns. That fire doesn't come from this world, it comes from above. And when it touches your life, you will never be the same. There is a cost to being set apart. It means you may be misunderstood, you may be mocked, you may lose the approval of man. But in losing those things, you gain something greater, the power and presence of God resting on your life. And that is worth more than all the applause and acceptance this world can offer. The time is short. The line is drawn. The call has gone out. You were not placed here just to survive. You were placed here to shake the earth with light. You were not put on this planet to blend into a culture of compromise. You were born to be a beacon of holiness, of clarity, of truth. And when the world sees you standing while others fall, when they see peace in your eyes while war rages around, when they hear you speak hope while the air is filled with fear, they will know you are different. They will know you are set apart. So this is your moment. This is your hour. Do not wait for the system to fix itself. It won't. Do not wait for the storm to pass, it's here. Do not wait for another voice to speak. You are the voice. Let it rise now, let it be bold, let it be clear, let it be holy, because when everything is falling and everyone is running, the one who stands with God becomes the signal fire in the darkness.